What's up, guys? 2-0 last night is my hockey. NHL continues to roll. And I think like most of the leans that I gave out on the show were good as well last night. I'm just seeing hockey really well. I'm nailing the hockey right now. 8-3, I think, to start the season in hockey. Obviously, I'll take that. I like it. I don't like that my Boston Bruins were uh, were on the losing side of one of those bets last night. But what can you do, man? I thought it was the right play on the Nashville Predators. They got there. It was a 4-0 final. The game was a little bit closer than that, I think, but still not a good game for the Bruins. Anyway, you slice it, and Minnesota Wild, a pretty easy win there as well as an underdog. So, gotta like to see that. We'll jump right into the NHL tonight. So we got NHL, we got a big slate of NBA games, but well, I can talk about NBA first, just because I'm not going to get involved in any of these first games of seasons for the NBA. I'll just maybe comment very briefly on a couple of these games that I at least have thoughts on, but I don't get involved in the NBA until we start seeing like scheduling situations that make sense. Very occasional, there'll be like an opening game where I'm like, yeah, I want to fade this team. Like potentially Dallas tomorrow would be a fade because they're in the dreaded finals hangover spot, but I'm going to have to look more into that game. And I know they've added Klay Thompson. I believe they have at least. So that is going to throw maybe a wrench into some of their established chemistry. And they're becoming a pretty old team, to be honest, in a lot of ways there. NHL, we have one game and weird isolated game tonight. And it's one of those weird home and home scenarios here. Philadelphia and Washington. Washington's down from minus 140 to minus 131. So the line is dropping a little bit towards Philadelphia. 77% of the tickets and 88% of the cash on Washington. Washington is, of course, going to be public here because they've been the one of these two teams that's been playing way better to start the season. But it looks like the line's moving against them, so maybe some reverse line movement, but it also looks like the cash percentage is to some extent on them. So kind of a difficult read. I would lean to the Philadelphia side here. I forget which one of you guys in the chat had Philadelphia last night. Unfortunately, whoever that was had Philadelphia and Vegas last night, so those went 1-1. This is a scenario where Washington played at Philadelphia yesterday, and now they flip to the other venue and play a back-to-back home and home tonight, where now Philadelphia goes to Washington. So I think it's a spot where Philadelphia is going to be a little bit extra motivated because they didn't look good last night. They got basically destroyed on their home ice by this Washington team, so they're going to want to go out and return the favor. So a lot of times in these home and homes, if the home team loses the first game, they tend to be a decent look on the road at the very least. Like that's the way I would start looking at it. Looking at what happened in the game last night, I mean, Washington did dominate this game statistically, though in some ways. They were the less physical team, which I think kind of tends to be the case with Washington, but they outshot Philadelphia significantly. Philadelphia not putting up a lot of shots. Their offense just doesn't look very good, and their goaltending has been a pretty major issue as well so far this season. So I'm not going to play this game, but it does seem like it may be a spot where you could potentially take Philadelphia, as Washington's coming off destroying them in Philadelphia. So that might mean Washington maybe they'll let up a little bit just because they've been playing so well. They just won at Philadelphia. They beat this Philadelphia team on their own ice. So they may think, hey, it's going to be easy to beat them again at home. And up next, they do have Tampa and the Rangers up next. So they may be looking ahead to those games because those are some pretty big games, some pretty major opponents here. So it is possible that Washington overlooks the team that they just beat on the road, Philadelphia, playing them again at home. It looks like Thompson is probably going to be in net here. Washington has Thompson and Lindgren, a decent goaltending duo there. They're both pretty decent. Thompson, I believe, was on Vegas up until last year. Neither of these goalies are that bad, so I don't really downgrade one versus the other. I wouldn't really say for Washington. So Thompson probably in net tonight. Doesn't really matter that much in my opinion. Philadelphia, I don't think their goaltending tandem matters that much either, but neither of their goalies are that good really. So it's been Urson and Fedotov. Probably it's going to be Fedotov in this one. Urson hasn't been good though. So even though they did win the one game, the one win wasn't a game that he started, but man, you got a Philadelphia team that's lost 5 games in a row and a Washington team that's won, I think, 4 or 5 in a row. So teams that look like they're going in opposite directions. But this would be a spot where I'd potentially, like I said, look to maybe fade Washington in this spot. But it's not going to be a play for me. And Fedotov in net for Philadelphia, it looks like. But either way, I mean, I don't trust either of these Philadelphia goalies. So it has to be a pretty decent scheduling spot or a really bad scheduling spot for the other team for me to really want to play Philadelphia. But you are getting them as an underdog price. It doesn't look like a horrible way to look. Scott, what's up? Slump continues. The Red Wings, yeah, they're your team, right? They're not playing very well. Scott, thanks for hanging out last night in Horseshoes and Hand Grenades. I believe you were in there. Me with Conspiracy Extremists and Jules for a little while. That was a fun episode last night. I feel like I'm just doing constant podcast episodes. It never ends, man. NBA, we have a big slate of games. Like I said, I don't jump into the NBA immediately, like cold, really. Like I like to wait and kind of get some scheduling spots to set up, unless there's some angle that I really like in one of these opening games. I'm not going to do it. My Boston Celtics looked quite good last night as far as their scoring was concerned. They just scored a ton against a Knicks team that should be better defensively than they looked last night. Man, that was crazy. And the Minnesota Timberwolves, I believe, lost to the LA Lakers, which not really what I expected in that game. It was a close game, I think. I didn't really watch much of it. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for showing up, man. Thanks for showing up early in the morning to this one. I will just point out briefly in the NBA that, I mean, I was looking towards the Detroit Pistons a little bit just because the perception around them is that they're this awful team, which, I mean, they're certainly not good, but I think they may start doing a little bit better with these young pieces that they have in there, and they're hosting the Pacers. The Pacers, of course, everybody remembers they were in the playoffs last year, and they made a run all the way to I think they made it to, the Eastern Conference Finals, right, against my Boston Celtics. I should know because I went to one of those games. So the Pacers are a team that really kind of extended themselves into the playoffs. So they could be a little bit extra gassed maybe because of that, and maybe in a little bit of a hangover spot from that. And they get to play the Pistons, who were basically the lowest team in the NBA last year. And it almost looks too easy from like a recreational better standpoint, I think, to lay what looks like a small spread with the Pacers against this bad Pistons team. 83% of the tickets and only 74% of the cash on the Pacers, but they're down from -5 to -4.5. Looks like there is some reverse line movement against a very public road favorite Pacers team here. So I don't mind looking towards taking the points with Detroit in that one. I don't really have much of a feel on most of these other games. There does look like a big cash versus ticket split on Magic Heat, with the cash percentage being on the side of the Magic, but the tickets being slightly on the Heat. But the Heat look like they moved up from 1 to 2, going through the 2. Maybe you could just see that as being extra value on the Orlando Magic side. I don't know. I'm not sure which one of these teams is actually the better team at this point, though. The Magic are an up-and-coming young team and probably consider themselves to be like the little brother in the state of Florida, because the Heat have been the better of those two teams for quite a while now. So maybe a little bit extra motivation for the Magic there. Both teams, I think, made it to the same point in the playoffs last year and lost in the first round. So not really that much of an edge one way or the other as far as that's concerned. And then Suns-Clippers is just kind of interesting. Both of these teams, I think, got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs last year, and maybe the Clippers advanced to the second round. I can't remember exactly how it went down, but both playoff teams last year, the Suns have flipped from what looks like a 1-point dog. I don't know when the line was, that up to a 5-point favorite going through the 5, which I'm guessing this has something to do with Kawhi Leonard, I think, if he's still on the Clippers. But is he really on the Clippers if he's never going to play again? I think he is still on the Clippers, but he's injured again. So it looks like he's not going to be playing. So I don't know if that is what's going on as far as why this line is where it is. But it does look like it's at the point where maybe there's some value to be found on the Clippers side here, with the Suns way high, up through the 5, 80% of the tickets and 94% of the cash on the Suns. It's going to be a wait-and-see approach for me as far as how these teams start the season. But the Clippers, I believe they're playing their first game in a new arena, because I believe they were sharing the Staples Center with the Lakers for as long as I can remember. Now the Clippers, I guess, have their own venue now, and it's going to be not only their home opener, but it's like Jerry West night as well, because he's big in LA, even though he's known as a Laker player. But I think they're celebrating Jerry West and the opening of the new arena tonight. I believe that's all going down. Jerry West passed away a few months ago. So all of that going on. So maybe a kind of high emotional game for the Clippers there. So they may show up and play a good game in this one and come within that number, which does look fairly high to me on the Suns there, even though I don't really have that much trust in the Clippers. And they were in pretty major disarray as they, even though they made the playoffs last year, they did not look good once they got there. So kind of just some feelings on these opener NBA games here, but not a whole lot going on there. College football, the last sport that's in play today is Major League Baseball. I think we still have to wait 2 more days for that World Series to start, but are we really waiting for that? I mean, this is the 2 most hated teams in baseball, Dodgers, Yankees. Are people really highly anticipating the start of that series? I mean, I wouldn't say so, although from a betting perspective, there may be some angles to be had in that series, but it's just, no, I don't think anybody's going to want either one of those teams to win. We got college football, and these are 2 games with spreads that are close to 20 or above 20, so some ugly Conference USA games tonight. I think these are both Conference USA again, right? Or yeah, I believe so. Liberty, Kennesaw State is the slightly earlier of these 2 games, and probably the worst of these 2 games, because any game that involves Kennesaw State is going to be the worst of those games. Liberty is up from 24.5 to 25.5. Going through the 25.5 is a huge road favorite. I'm not entirely sure that line is justified. I mean, Kennesaw State has just been so bad. Probably have the worst offense in FBS. They're new to FBS, but even teams that are new to FBS usually don't perform this badly on offense. But this Kennesaw State team, they just really can't score. So, I mean, that's basically why the line is where it is. And Liberty is on some historical win streak right now, even though they themselves don't seem to be like totally clicking on offense, but their defense has been pretty good. They've been a good team, and they keep winning games. So they're undefeated and atop the standings in that conference. But they are public because of that as well, and because of how awful Kennesaw State is. 74% of tickets and 96% of the cash on Liberty. And it does look like the cash is coming in on Liberty and moving the line up on Liberty. But, I mean, I think that line is just too high at this point. I would not be laying a massive road price like that in any sport, really. But it just looks totally ridiculous. But Liberty is certainly the way better of these 2 teams. I think the better way to look at this game would actually be to the under, but the line has moved a bit. It's down from 47.5 to 46, so a low total. So we have a low total in this game and what looks like a pretty high total in the other game. But I think a lot of times in football, when a total is really low, the odds makers are indicating something to you, and they probably are indicating that this is probably going to be a lower scoring game, and you may want to look to the under, and it makes it seem more difficult to do when it's a lower total. So lower totals, you tend to want to actually look to go under, and higher totals, you tend to actually want to look to go over on those, even though it looks kind of difficult to do because the total already looks too high. But that's the way I kind of look at both of these games tonight, actually. So I kind of think the under is the best way to approach this first game, or the best way to approach it is to ignore the game completely. But if you have to play it, that would be where I would look. The total's down, though, like I said, from 47.5 to 46. 47 is kind of a key number in football totals, though, so you playing the under, you've lost a little bit of value there, which isn't that great. 81% of the tickets and 86% of the cash, both on the over there, so a little bit of a cash percentage on the over, but I don't really buy into that very much at all. I do think that the money has come in towards the under, and I do agree with that because Kennesaw State, I mean, how are they going to score? They can't score. They put up 5 points last week in a primetime game, but does that mean we're actually going to start getting value on like playing overs in Kennesaw State games? Probably not, because like I said, this offense is that bad. It's terrible. So I don't know if they're going to be able to shake things up and put in a new quarterback. I don't know what's going on there, but against the Liberty defense, it's pretty good as well. I don't see Kennesaw State being able to do a whole lot offensively in this game. And Liberty, they have a good ground game. I think they like to run the ball quite a bit, so that may keep their score down a little bit as well. And Kennesaw State is at least not as bad on defense as they are on offense, so they may be able to not give up that many points to Liberty in this one. As far as like it getting over the total here. So I like the under in that one. And Liberty just might not pay that much attention really to Kennesaw State. It might be a spot where they might overlook Kennesaw State just a little bit here. Because Liberty, I mean, I think they have just bigger games. I mean, what could be a lesser game than Kennesaw State, really? I mean, Liberty is coming off a game that they should have won more easily, though, against Florida International. Florida, Illinois, my favorite guys. And they're coming out of a bye. So I could see that going both ways, really, as far as how well Liberty is going to perform, because they should have won that game more easily against FIU. And instead, they escaped in overtime. Then they went into a bye. So either that bye might disrupt this winning momentum that they have and it doesn't come at a good time, or they might look at that FIU game and think, hey, man, we got away with playing a bad game here. We need to fix something, and maybe that's what they'll be doing in the bye. But they do have, of course, a bigger game up next with Jacksonville State, who's one of the better teams in the conference up next and is still undefeated in the conference. So you may not get Liberty's full A game and full focus in this game, possibly. And Kennesaw State, I mean, they're just looking for their first win just so they don't get completely embarrassed. And played fairly close last week against Middle Tennessee. But in that game, Middle Tennessee's quarterback, Vattiato, I think he was sick and he was still trying to play in the game. So I think that has something to do with why Middle Tennessee's offense was so bad in that game. Just to throw that out there is maybe one excuse for that game looking the way that it did. But yeah, I think the under, probably the way to look there, because Liberty, I mean, playing against this awful Kennesaw State team, they're probably not going to break out like all of their offensive tricks in this game. They're probably going to keep it fairly vanilla. Middle Tennessee, Jacksonville State, both teams I just mentioned, also in the same conference. They're playing in the slightly later of the two games. Jacksonville State, also a big favorite, but down from 22 to 19.5. They do have 73% of the cash on them, but 65% of the tickets over on the other side on MTSU. So it looks like the cash percentage is actually a pretty strong discrepancy on the Jacksonville State side, but the line has also dropped through a key number of 21 all the way down to 19.5. So hard for me to read what's going on in the market here. Because was that like a false move to try to drive that line lower so that the professionals could come in and then lay the points with Jacksonville State at the better number? I don't really know, because like I said, it looks like there's a big time tickets versus cash discrepancy here, which flies against what the market move has been so far as the line is concerned. So as it gets like later up towards game time, I tend to put more stock into where the cash percentage is than where like the earlier line move was. So maybe some indicators on the Jacksonville State side there. I like the total better in this one too, though, and I like it over. It's gone down from 65.5 to 64, though. 74% of tickets on the over and 90% of the cash on the under. So it looks like a big cash discrepancy there towards the under as well. But like I said, I don't really agree with it. I think the perception of these two teams is that they're not very good offensively right now, especially on the Middle Tennessee side. Like, what the hell happened in that last game against Kennesaw State? They only put up 14 points against that team. But like I said, Middle Tennessee can throw the ball with Vattiato there, and he was on their team last year, and he actually shredded Jacksonville State last year. He put up over 400 yards passing when he faced Jacksonville State last year, although it is kind of a different team this year, different personnel to some extent. But Jacksonville State's defense, if anything, this year is actually a little bit worse than it was last year. So Vattiato, he should bounce back from that bad performance. Like I said, he was sick, and Middle Tennessee had been losing so many games. They finally won a game, but they played a pretty difficult schedule, man. I mean, Ole Miss, Western Kentucky, Duke, Memphis, they shouldn't be expected to win any of those games. Then they were an underdog against Louisiana Tech and really put in a poor performance in that one too. Unexpectedly poor, but getting that win, getting that like monkey off their back, finally getting an FBS win might help them to some extent. So that is one argument in favor of the Middle Tennessee side, but also is an argument in favor of Middle Tennessee maybe being able to do something offensively in this game. Like I said, I don't think what we saw out of their offense, which was nothing last week, is much of an indicator of anything, because Vattiato was sick, and I think he's going to be able to throw the ball on this Jacksonville State defense just like he did last year. So it is more of a focus spot for Middle Tennessee, though, and maybe that win over Kennesaw State gave them some new momentum. They probably know they should have won that game more easily because Kennesaw State is awful, but they finally got that win, so that might propel them forward, whereas Jacksonville State, it is possible that they look ahead a little bit to this Liberty game, because that is a much bigger game next week with both of these teams in the top three in the conference right now in the standings, and probably actually the top three teams in the conference with Sam Houston maybe a little bit lesser than those three teams. So maybe cause for a look ahead there from Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State, I mean, they're coming off blowing out New Mexico State, and then I think they had a bye after that. So they've been off for a while. Maybe that bye will also actually kind of disrupt their momentum as well. But they were putting up a lot of point totals, man. And if anything, maybe that bye will just kind of make them lapse on defense a little bit. So this Jacksonville State team, I mean, they can put up points. Middle Tennessee's defense is really not good. Kennesaw State just doesn't have a good offense, so that's why they didn't do anything against Middle Tennessee. And Middle Tennessee is definitely a team that could get lit up by Jacksonville State's offense. Jacksonville State's put up a lot of high point totals. Their offense is good, and their defense is not very good. They run the ball quite well. So they could be in line to do some damage against a Middle Tennessee defense that's not very good. Both of these defenses are not good. So again, I think the over kind of makes sense in this game. And if you forced me to lean to a side, it would be actually to the Middle Tennessee side and where that initial line move is, just because I think that they're in the spot that might draw a little bit more focus, even though they have less rest, but they still have 7 days off, whereas it's possible that Jacksonville State just has too many days off coming out of that bye there. And then I forgot to look Liberty and Kennesaw State. Kennesaw State played last week, right? So they're not coming out of a bye, so Liberty has the extra rest in that game there. But Kennesaw State still has like 7 days off. Liberty may have a little bit too much rest going into that game as well. So that's the way that I break down those two games. Certainly not games that I'm going to play, but I'll give you a little bonus because I don't know if the line is still going to be here, but I'm going to play the NFL Thursday night game, and I have not played any of them this year, I don't think. But my gauge on the Thursday night games has been good, so that's how you know I'm going to finally lose one, right? Because I think in my pick'em pools and my leans, because I give out a lean basically in every one of these on my show because they're isolated games, I think I've been right about all but one or two of them this entire season. So I've had a good gauge on these Thursday night games. So that means I'm finally going to lose one, right? But Vikings-Rams, this line might not be here by tomorrow. I don't really know, even though the Vikings are public. I like the Rams +3 in this one. I think it's a really difficult spot for the Vikings in this one, even though they are definitely the better team. Vikings, it looks like the line's dropping on them as it's gone through the 3. It was 3 with juice on the side of the Vikings, all the way down to 3 with reduced juice, headed towards 2.5. It looks like 74% of the tickets and only 68% of the cash on the public road favorite Vikings. So they are public. I mean, the public is only going to come in on the Vikings here, man. I mean, a one-loss team. The Vikings looked quite good in their loss last week to Detroit. I mean, it's as far as losses are concerned, you couldn't look much better than the Vikings did last week in a loss against Detroit. When you lose to a really good team like Detroit and you lose in a close battle like that that's high scoring, the public is not going to be off of you the next week. They're going to want more of you, even though you did lose that game. Because it's like, oh, this Vikings team is still really good. That was just a really close, difficult game between two good teams, right? But I look at it and I say, but wait a minute. The Vikings just played a really difficult game against a really good team, and they lost that game. So I think they're in like a hangover spot, and that's the way that I look at it. And that's also their first loss of the season, so that kind of kills all that momentum they had. So when you have like a step-up game like that, and that's your first loss of the season, it was a big game, big emotional division game, I think that kind of hangs you over into the next game there. And that's how I look at this game. And they have to turn around and play on a short week and go to the Pacific Coast and play a game that's at 8:15 p.m. Pacific Coast time. So that's going to be, as far as Minnesota is concerned, Central Time Zone, based on their like biological clock. This is going to be a fairly late game. Not quite as bad as it would be if they were an East Coast team, but still not great. This game's going to end at like basically 11 p.m. Their time by their biological clock, and with almost no prep time here with a really short week to have to turn around on Thursday and go on the road. And they've only played 2 other road games this entire season, so they're not really that used to going on the road either. Difficult spot, man. It looks like a pretty tough spot for me. And playing against a Rams team that hasn't looked that great and has been injured, it does not look like a good spot for the Vikings at all in this one. And when you have an unfamiliar venue that you're going to that you don't play in very often, and it's a quick turnaround time on Thursday night, that tends to have a greater advantage to the home team because, of course, the home team is familiar with their own stadium, obviously, and the Rams aren't even traveling. They haven't traveled for a couple weeks, and they had a bye before last week's game, so the Rams are in the better rest spot and the way better travel spot, so it is a way better spot for the Rams, and I think the Rams should show up focused. They're hosting a Thursday night game against one of the teams with the best records in football. And the Rams didn't do particularly well against the Raiders in a spot where maybe the Rams should have been better. The Rams came out of the bye and probably should have been more focused against this Raiders team than they actually were. The Rams, I think, did well, I was going to say, I thought the Rams outplayed them in this game still, but they didn't exactly. I mean, the Rams didn't actually do that well. They had the benefit of 4 turnovers by this Raiders team that just keeps making mistakes and can't get anything right. But I think the Rams are going to look at this and think, well, we got away with one here, man. I think that game doesn't look that great. They should have won that game more easily against a bad team like the Raiders. So I think that means you're going to see a more focused Rams team here. They got Sean McVay there still. I mean, he's good at bouncing back from ugly games. And that's also another reason why the public is only going to be on Minnesota here, because Minnesota looked about as good as you could possibly look in a loss last week, and the Rams looked about as ugly as you could possibly look in a win, barely getting by one of the lesser teams in the NFL. So I like the Rams plus the points in this game tomorrow night. So I'll give out a play on the Rams. I don't have the banner for it, but should I add it just for posterity or whatever? Yeah, why not? It's LA +3, but it might not be there. You might still only be able to find reduced juice on it. LA Rams. Yeah, there you go. Or actually LAR, right? Because they're not the Chargers. They're not LAC. I'm getting way too autistic about it. There you go. LA Rams +3 is going to be one of my NFL plays this week. Just as I explained, I think it is a spot play. Obviously, the Vikings are the better of these two teams, but in this spot, I just don't think so. And the total in this one's gone up from 45.5 to 48, going through the 48. So it looks like some legitimate movement on the over in this one as well. 67% of tickets and 84% of the cash, both on the over. I mean, both of these teams are probably going to be able to get something done through the air in this one. You're looking at a team with 2 good quarterbacks, you're looking at a game with 2 good quarterbacks, but Sam Darnold, I call him Sam Bradford by accident on my weekend video. Darnold is still better than Bradford, even though I'm not a Darnold believer. But still, these passing attacks have been good. I mean, Darnold, even though I'm not a believer in him specifically, he's got a lot of weapons around him that he can throw to. Jefferson, obviously, the main one of those. So these teams should probably be able to get something done. With a short turnaround time, it can affect the defenses a little bit more, even though a lot of times I don't want to do the over, though, because it's gone up through that key number of 47. And also, just because a lot of these Thursday night games do wind up being lower scoring, especially in games where the teams are unfamiliar with each other, because there's kind of a feeling out process and it takes them a little while to get going. So I like the side, obviously, more than the total in this one. I do mostly sides, so there you go. LA Rams is going to be that play. No actual plays on today's card, though. Waiting for the NBA to get going a little bit. We'll see what I can do as far as what I want to do with the football videos for this week, college and pro football, because I'm going to be leaving tomorrow to get down to Bohemian Grove in Florida. Tower Gang Toad. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the Tower Gang Podcast, the most hilarious, offensive podcast on the planet. I'm going to be out tonight. I don't know if the guys are doing a show without me tonight or not, but the official episode 200 is going to be live at Bohemian Grove on Saturday. So if you're in the area in Central Florida, show up for that. It's going to be conspiracies and comedy, man, for two evenings, Friday and Saturday. Come hang out with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. Patreon.com/TowerGang. And you can throw us some support there as well and get live pre-shows, post-shows, that bonus content, hang out in a Telegram with us. And I think that's about it, man. So as far as Better Off Dead, my NFL and college football videos, I don't know if I'm going to be feeling up to it tonight, but I may release them tonight, or I might just be on the road and I might have to do like shortened videos, like basically with my phone, just giving you like what my plays are or whatever, because I'm still going to have to break down the cards, man, and figure it out. Those college football Saturday cards, man, those are brutal slates to handicap. College basketball Saturdays are the worst. College football is second as far as how many games there are. You're just looking at so many games. NFL is a lot easier, but my NFL has been bad, so I got to get on track. Let's get it done, man. So have a good one, everybody. Peace out.